Welcome to the Published and Paid podcast, where we share book, business, leadership, and life lessons in 20 minutes or less to help you build a thought leadership brand and business. My name is Jasmine Womack. I'm a former middle school language arts teacher turned seven-figure entrepreneur, and I am glad that you are here. Let's get started. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of the Published and Paid podcast. And in today's episode, I am going to let you into my mind. And so I'm going to be sharing my insights as a CEO from my first 6 years of running a company full time. Now, if you've listened to any previous episodes of the Published and Paid podcast or been in our ecosystem, then you probably already know that I was a language arts middle school teacher for 12 years. And I started my business while I was teaching, grew it to the six-figure mark, past the six-figure mark, and then transitioned into full-time entrepreneurship in 2018. So at the time of this recording, so I've been in business full-time for 6 years. It will be 7 years in May of 2025. So I have we've gone through business in the pandemic. After the pandemic, I've had several, economical cycles, political cycles while I've been in business, and am still standing strong and have learned so many lessons along the way. And so as we prepare to go into the new year, we have about less than 50 days left until 2025. I wanted to share some of my lessons and insights that I've learned over the past few years, because I feel that especially on social media, entrepreneurship is glamorized. And a lot of people share the wins that they experience. They share their journey, but they don't really talk about how they process through things or how they think about things or how they analyze things. And especially for our listeners who have a spouse, for our listeners who may have children, bonus children, blended families, the process of building a business and what it requires is just different. It just is. It's different than people who are single, and it's different from those who are growing a business who maybe retire their spouse or even their spouse retires them, right? When you are boots on the ground, you are an involved spouse, both spouses are working, and you are hands-on with your children, meaning that you don't outsource the raising of your children, then building a business is different. It really, truly is. And there are not a lot of people who come from a perspective as it pertains to building a business, especially not a lot of people of faith, that can give real practical insight and guidance on what it truly requires when you have all of those elements involved. And so that's a little bit of what I am going to do today. All right. So it's so important, again, because it's not enough to just share what I've done, share how we've been in business for 7 years, how I transitioned into business, but more so those things that are going to make the next 7 years even better than the first 7 years. I feel like the first 6, 7 years have honestly been a training ground. It's been a training ground to challenge me to see if I really wanted this. Every aspect of my life was challenged in some way, whether it's been my health, it's been my personal belief system, my parenting, definitely my leadership abilities, right? Whether or not, ascertaining whether or not this is even something I truly, really want, and how bad I want it, and at what levels, right? All of the things. So I'm so excited to share this with you all today. All right. So, the first lesson that I've learned, or the first insight, is that setting boundaries in business and in life is absolutely necessary. It is so easy to turn your business into an idol, especially after you start getting a little bit of success and you start reaping the fruits of your labor, and you want more of it, and you want to continue doing what's working, and you want to continue serving people, helping people in high levels, right? It can become an idol. And so I've learned the first insight is that you've got to learn how to set boundaries. When I started my business, I initially set my business times based on when I was working and when I was available to work my business, right? So this means that when I was working, I was, in school, I was at my job during the day. So my time was very limited. So all of my hours were primarily scheduled for the evenings after my children went to bed. And at that time, my children were small. So we might have done some extracurricular activities, but normally for earlier ages, they're earlier in the afternoon, like around 4 or 5 o'clock, right? Or either, on the weekends. And so I had the time and the flexibility to do things, early in the afternoon, so that by the time I got off work, cooked dinner, worked out, or took my children to whatever practices they had, I was still able to have them in bed by 8:30ish, right? Which meant that I could work on my business for 3 hours every evening. And so at the time that I started my business, my hours of operation were scheduled either during that evening time or either on the weekends, because that's when I had availability. However, after I transitioned from my career into full-time business ownership, I tried to maintain that same schedule because although it was no longer convenient for me, it was convenient for my clients because that's what they were used to. And many of them still held jobs. And I adopted the mindset and belief system that I needed to be available whenever they were. I needed to make it convenient for them. I needed to do all these things, right? But what that put me, the situation that put me into after I started working for myself, is that here I was now working all day, and now I was working into the evening as well. So I was not working 6, 7, or 8 hour days. I was now working 12, 13, 14 hour days by trying to do things in the evenings because I thought more people would show up. And you know what I learned? That wasn't necessarily the case. It just wasn't the case. I also learned, because at some point I'm like, you know what? I got exhausted. And I said, I've got to make this work for me. Like, I even had a recent reminder of this, probably about a year ago, or maybe about 6 to 8 months ago, when for one of my programs, I set our Q&A call times in the evenings on Mondays. And it worked for a while until it didn't, because I'm in school right now working on my doctorate. And so when the semester started, I ended up having a statistics class every Monday from like 6 to 8. So what that meant for me is that 9 o'clock a.m., I was in our team meeting. I typically coached my clients on our group. At that time, the calls were in the afternoons, but I would still have meetings throughout the day. My kids would come home in the afternoon, from the school bus. We would do tutorial. We would do their extracurricular activities. I would help with homework, start dinner, 6 o'clock. I am in my statistics class from 6 to 8, leave statistics class from 8 to 9:30. I'm coaching. I was pushing 12, 13, 14 hour days. And I said, y'all, listen, I'm not able. I'm like, I'm gonna be real with myself. I'm like, I'm not even able to sustain this. And I'm like, I don't even want to work in the evenings, because now that's taken away from my kids and my family, even though they understood and they were good with it. It was a stark reminder, Jazz, set your boundaries. And what I learned even during that time, even recently, was that just because you do something or you set times at times and periods that you think are going to be more convenient or more accessible, it doesn't mean that people are going to show up. The people that are going to show up are going to show up regardless, whether that means that's in person or whether that means it's on the replay. Furthermore, you literally cannot set a perfect time, because no matter what time you schedule your coaching services for, it's going, especially if you're working in groups, it is going to be inconvenient for somebody. And somebody having the mindset and limited thinking that, oh, I'm behind because I can't show up live. You can address it in your programs, but at the end of the day, that's a limiting belief they have to get over, because showing up to a live session doesn't make the info, watching a replay does not make the information any less actionable. It doesn't make the information watered down. At the end of the day, whether it's through a voice note, whether it's through a video, whether it's through a live session, because most of the time when people tune in to live sessions, they got to go back and watch the replays anyway to pick up things that they lost. If somebody's going to put in the work, they're going to put in the work. And if they're not, they're not. And if they're the type of person that's going to make excuses, they're the type of person that's going to make excuses. And it is what it is. Now, as a coaching consultant, yes, I do believe it's your job to provide some guidance and coach your clients through a limiting belief such as that, but it's not your job to coddle them, because you as an adult cannot hold them responsible for showing up for themselves. They've got to hold themselves responsible. And so once I came into this revelation, I took the pressure off of myself that nobody was placing on me except for me. And I reinstituted very, very clear boundaries. Like, I have very start and stop dates times for when I work. I have dates and times during the week when I work late, when I might take my mobile desktop to my kids' practices and work on whatever. I have times when I respond to DMs. I have times when I focus on sales every single day. I have times built in during my day when I respond. I have times when I engage. Just because a client is off on the weekend and they are messaging me, if they're a private client, it doesn't mean that I have the responsibility to message them right back, especially if the weekend is my off time, if that's my rejuvenation time, if that's my rest time. Now, if you're working with private clients, you definitely want to make sure that you set your guidelines and expectations up front. And that's something that I do with my private clients, because they have direct access to me, whereas group coaching clients don't. But during our onboarding process, I'm like, these are my hours of operation. This is when you can when you can expect a response from me. This is when you can expect audits returned. If you message me after this time or on these dates during the week, don't expect a response until this day and time, because I'm off. I'm not online. Even if you see me posting on Facebook, I am not online. That is my personal time. And as long as you have your own boundaries identified and documented, and you communicate those well, then you shouldn't have any problems. But setting clear boundaries, it's an absolute necessity, or else you're going to find yourself giving more and more and more. And when you don't have clear boundaries, that's one of the ingredients and characteristics that can actually lead to burnout. Okay. Insight number 2 is to manage your money. Manage your money. Now, this should come as a given. But when you start making money in your business, it is so easy to reinvest in your business, almost to a point of detriment. Now, of course, some investments in business are necessary. Like, I will forever stand by investing through mentorship, guidance, and coaching, right? However, there is a such thing as overspending. The year when we generated $953,000 in our business, we would have crossed the $1 million mark in cash revenue, cash in the bank. However, that year I had some clients that defaulted from their payments. And at the time, I didn't have a plan to recoup those funds or to make up for what was lost. Now that I know, whenever you enroll in group programs, you always need to account for a percentage defaulting so that you can have a plan to recoup those funds or either to make up those funds in sales. I mean, it's just part of the business. People don't talk about, but it's absolutely required, right? If you want to hit your projected revenue and sales goals, revenue goals. Um, but the year that we made $953,000, we spent just about every single dime. And I was sitting there at the end of the year having a conversation with my CFO. Shouts out to Danielle at Pearl Business Consulting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what the F happened? What did I do? And she had been telling me all year, but I saw the income coming in. And I'm going to tell you, I overspent that year. And ever since then, I was sick to my stomach. Because I'll be honest with y'all, every time I look at my kids' faces, I thought about, dang, I effed up. Like I could have managed this in a better way. I could have done this. I could have done that. But one of the things that I also learned was during that time was that I had to give myself grace, as this is a lesson that many entrepreneurs experience and go through. I learned the lesson, so I'm letting you know right now. There is a such thing as overspending. And just because you have it coming in doesn't mean that it needs to go out. And I'm telling you, like, we had our bank accounts, we had surpluses in terms of our savings accounts and all the things. So we were still good, but I wasn't pulling a profit. And that was the year that I really, I knew it, but that was the year that I learned and that I understood that it doesn't matter how much you make. What matters is how much you keep. And ever since then, I have been making adjustments in order to generate more profit, to keep more profit. And the two areas that I overspent that year, this was probably about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. The two areas that I overspent was on tech and team. Tech and team. On team, I had spent over $500,000. It makes me sick to my stomach to even think about it. I'll probably end up talking about how in a different episode. And that particular year, I think that we had spent around $40,000 in tech. And I said, are you serious that I spent $40,000 on my tech stack? And that's when I started doing an audit. What are we paying for? What are we paying for and not using? What platforms are we double paying for? I realized I had subscriptions to 2 or 3 different social media scheduling apps, and I was only really using one of them. I had subscriptions to different video editing apps, and different video recording apps, and I was only really using one of them. I had subscriptions to things that I was trying out, testing out. I just began to cut. Let's go all the way down to the basics, to only what we need. And I am so proud to say that at the time of this recording, we have cut our tech stack by at least 60 to 70%. And this came from my CFO. And this was just going through eliminating stuff. I'm going to eliminate some things today. I'm like, okay, that project is over. I no longer use that platform. I don't even need that platform. And what I find, especially when people are building, you get caught up in shiny object syndrome. Like right now, everybody is going to this community platform called School. And I think that it's like $99 a month. Well, that's like $1,100 per year. right? Or right around 11 to $1,200 per year. Is that necessary for you to grow your business? Or are you just trying to rush over there because you see other influencers rushing over there? You know what? They're testing. They're testing something out. And if it doesn't work, they're going to either go to another platform or they're going to go back to what they were doing. Like this is how it works. And so you have to get to a point where you're not making decisions based on in your business in regards to what you use, based on what you see other people using. You have to analyze where you are in business. Is it worth the expense? Are you generating income that currently covers the cost for that? Or is this platform something that you can grow into later? Can you start, how can you start using free or more accessible tools and eventually grow into paid, platforms as you generate revenue in your business? Otherwise, you're just going to be spending out, and then you get frustrated because you're spending money on stuff. It feels productive because you are creating things within it. But unless you're generating revenue, I tell my clients, you need to keep your expenses as low as possible until you're bringing in the revenue that you want that should actually not only pay for this, but the system is actually helping you by either by saving you some time by automating you some processes and streamlining your processes and your onboarding and offboarding and helping your clients to have a better experience. Like, this is what we got to talk about. I overspent on tech and team. I had a lot of contract. I had a full-time employee. I had a contractor that was dedicated to me, but I had a lot of contractors that honestly I was overpaying. They were putting in, X amount of hours, and I was paying thousands for that. And it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it because they weren't, great people. They were great people, but it wasn't worth it because I didn't have their position tied to an income amount and I wasn't holding them to it. I was not holding them to, KPIs. I wasn't holding them to certain outcomes. And so it was an expense for me month after month after month financially, as well as energetic and mental wise, because I was not requiring more of them than to simply complete a task. And that was my fault as the leader. I have learned my lesson, and we run a totally different ship these days. But I'm sharing these insights with you so that you can take from them and apply them to your business and even keep them in mind as you grow your business, those of you all who are in earlier stages. I have a full team now. We run a totally different ship, and I will do another podcast based on, how my team is currently structured, based on how I hold everyone accountable and how everyone is actually accountable to themselves and how we manage growth and expectations with KPIs, incentives, and even performance improvements. Insight number 3 is to hire slow and fire fast. This was an error that I made in my business. I would hire people, but then I would hold on too long. Let me explain. When I was starting this in the hiring, when I started expanding my team, I would hire based on who people knew. I would hire based on relationships. I would hire based out of desperation or need. And I really didn't have a thorough hiring process. And so typically when you don't have a hiring process and you're hiring based off of relationship or desperation, then you're going to end up running into some roadblocks somewhere, especially as you begin to grow as a leader in your leadership. And you're going to realize that your needs are different than what the people that you hire are providing. You're going to start having different desires and wanting them to show up in a different way, right? But what happens is that when you do this, you also tend to hold on to people for longer than you should, or not have, you know, necessary conversations. And you'll hold on to people because they're a nice person. You'll hold on to them as a member of your team out of loyalty. You'll hold on to them out of, you know, whatever subconscious people pleasing, you know, thing is still underneath the surface. But what I've learned is that when you hold on to team members whose spaces in your organization have expired, then you're actually destroying the culture of your company, and you're actually putting yourself in a position that could bring, you know, create that can be very detrimental and expensive. You'll end up spending more money holding on to the wrong person than you would if you were to let them go, refine your processes, improve your leadership, and hire someone that's a better fit for your company. When you are hiring a team member, whether it's an employee or a contractor, you need to have a documented, verified hiring process for whatever position that you're hiring for. If you're going to have someone come into an organization and working for you part-time or full-time, I'm not necessarily talking about project-based. You need a hiring process. You need to be able to vet them. You need a detailed application process. And then following the application process, you need paid test projects. What I found through speaking with other CEOs who've struggled to hire or even hold on to a team or manage a team once they have them is that they don't have any of these things in place. And they interview someone, and their idea of the interview is hopping on a Zoom call. Listen, if someone hasn't even proven that they have the thinking processes and the attitude to even work for you, then there's like to work in your company, to help your company achieve its goals, not necessarily not work for you. I don't like that language, but work in your company as a part of your team to help the company achieve its goals. Like, what's the point in getting on the phone with them? Me personally, I'm not getting on a phone or on a video call or any type of meeting with anybody before we go through this application process and these 2 to 3 rounds of test projects. Test project number 1 should test for skill and ability to do the job. Test project number 2 should test for your level of critical thinking. How do you process? How are you going to solve problems? And test project number 3 needs a test for attitude. Attitude. After they've passed these test projects, then you can schedule a meeting. Otherwise, what's the point of meeting? I have gone through some hiring processes with people, with you know, potential candidates, you know, people who were interested in working with my team, and they didn't follow directions. And if I would have just hired him or her based off of conversation, oh, the conversation was good. They seemed very amped and eager to work. But if I would have just hired them based off of that, I would have been up the creek. Because you know what? When I gave them these test projects, they didn't pay attention to detail. I would have been paying somebody that wasn't paying attention to detail, wasn't reading anything. It would have been more energy and more time trying to get them to correct the mistakes that they made than just working with them in the first place. But I was able to avoid several headaches by test projects. I was able to avoid folks who had nasty attitudes or lackadaisical attitudes by test projects. I give a test projects, well, I don't understand why I got to do this. Done. Attitude, right? I give a test project, I give a deadline, somebody misses the deadline, ask or they wait until the very last minute to ask for an extension. By that time, my mind is already made up. They wait until the very last moment of the extension, and then the stuff that they turn in isn't even an effort. It's just trash. It's crap. It's minimal effort. That's not only skill level, that's added. And then they turn around and ask me if I'm going to use their stuff in my marketing. I'm like, first of all, even if I did, I paid you for it. First of all. Second of all, I can't use it because it's not quality. You threw something together and gave this to me. Third of all, your attitude is trash. That's attitude. To not only not do something, but to do it late and then turn in, bottom of the barrel, followed by trying to see whether or not I'm going to use what you created. Why? I already told you I'm not moving forward. That, for me, that's attitude. Like, how do they act? Are they going to act like they're a part of the team? Are they going to come and be a part of the team? Or are they going to act like they doing you a favor and you better be grateful and they give you bottom of the barrel? Absolutely not. You need people who want to be part of the team. You need people who understand the vision and are going to go above and beyond to help make it happen because they take pride in their work and because they take pride in themselves and what they do. And because they see the work that they do as a greater ministry. I heard one of my mentors say that people think that they hire the team and the business will grow. But the truth is that you must hire the team to grow the business. And I cannot agree more. Every position that you hire for needs to be tied to a deliverable and to an outcome. And typically, when it's time for people to transition out, but then you start holding on to them. And so one of the things that I would suggest is that when you have hires who have not met the expectation, take your personal feelings out of it. Don't get emotional about it. Don't get frustrated about it. You start feeling yourself having frustration and anxiety because things aren't done or they're constantly falling through the cracks. It's either your leadership training and communication or lack of it, or it's either they're not doing the job. And when you know that you can check off the boxes because you train them, you continue to train them, you communicated very clearly ahead of time, not last minute, what's needed, and they understand what a successful project looks like and they still don't do it, then that's on them. Case in point, I recently had to let my marketing automations team go. I hired an agency and they started out strong. They were giving us ideas to help us generate income. We implemented some of those ideas. It brought an ROI. They were on point. But over time, the quality of work started diminishing. And it was a team. We had probably about 3 people set to our account. Until we got to my live event, and I realized that despite us talking about the live event for 3 weeks, despite everything being documented in regards to what the tech and the automations and the confirmations needed to be and look like, even the week of published and paid live, we talked about it. We talked about everything that needed to be done and sent out and making sure it was done. I get to my event in between sessions and I realized they were putting messages in Slack about emails that had supposed to been scheduled 2 weeks ago. Now, I don't check emails. I have people on the team that do that. But what this did, it was an alarm to me. Like, number one, we need somebody that's not on the marketing and automations team to actually go through the funnels to make sure everything is set up, number one. And number two, this brought to light to me that they weren't doing their jobs because everything was highlighted, everything was spelled out, everything was documented. But we had people enrolling in our programs and probably one of our biggest launches every single year. And the checkout pages worked, but they weren't getting any type of confirmation page. They weren't getting a welcome email. They weren't getting access to their programs or products. They weren't getting anything part of our onboarding processes, which is very important. Which meant that after the event, I had to spend time putting it together. And by that time, I'm like, oh, I'm done. Because not only did we talk about this and every single thing is documented, we talked about this multiple times. They said that it was done and nothing was done. I was done with them. I was like, oh, they gone. We let them finish up one more funnel. But what we did, and because we still had a funnel that needed to be finished, on paper, we gave a 30-day grace period for them to improve, to show improvement. But even during that 30-day period, they were still slow on stuff. They were asking questions, asking my assistant questions regards to tagging that their team was responsible for handling. And it was just an overall headache. So we just went ahead and sent the cancellation of contract. 30 days. Now, The only reason that I kept that long was so that we could implement the process, document it, and finish out our last funnel build. But even finishing out that last funnel build wasn't even worth the hassle that it took to finish it. Hire slow, fire fast, save yourself headache. But before you start firing, you have to analyze and assess whether or not they're having difficulties because of their inability or refusal to do, or whether it's they need more training, they need more support, they need more clarity. Because sometimes CEOs will sit up and try to ask somebody to do something the day before under a lot of pressure. You haven't given clear instructions or details, and that's not fair to your team. Things can be high pressure without being stressful and feeling pressury, right? So you want to make sure that when you're hiring thinkers, you're hiring doers, you're hiring people who are creative, people who take initiative, people who come up with ideas. You don't want to hire folks who just sit around waiting for you telling them what to do. And if you're not telling them what to do, they're not doing anything. Something that used to drive me up the wall. I didn't realize that this is why I was always exhausted, but I was thinking for my team, meaning that, like, at one point in time, my former full-time assistant, she would come and say to me, well, this person, I know this person has this on this day, so they need to reschedule. What day and time do you want to reschedule to? And I would sit there irritated. And by the end of the day, I was exhausted because I realized, you know what? I've done everybody else's thinking for them. What I had to shift to was having them to think for themselves. Hey, well, this is your job to manage the calendar. Based on what you see, what do you think? And based on my schedule for when I take meetings, what day and time do you think will be available? Turn it back around. And so that particular team member is no longer with our team because when I started turning things back around and requiring them to think, this person to think, she didn't want to do it. And she ended up making a mistake that could have cost me six figures. She ended up processing a 100,000. It was supposed to be $1,000 payment for $100,000, and I'm just so grateful that I caught it. And that was when I went ahead and let her go. But people, when you have team members who like a challenge and they want to rise to the occasion and they want to be better than where they currently are, they are going to accept and embrace that challenge. And then they're going to actually start thinking for themselves instead of depending on you thinking for them. For instance, we had a situation where one of my team members was like, well, I'm in Kajabi and I can't do this. And they were asking me. And so I turned it back around. Well, what have you done? Where have you looked for an answer? Did you look on the Kajabi blog? Did you speak to our marketing and automations team who handles this? Did you inquire with our ops manager before asking me? What have you done to solve this problem that doesn't require you asking me? I'm the very, very last stop. But what have you done? And then the next time at our team meeting, she came and said, hey, when we were talking about our grows and glows, she said, listen, one grow that I have is I know I can take more initiative and I can think about solutions and come up with solutions instead of only looking at the problems. And I'm like, she's amazing. Like, when people are not going to be perfect, but when you have people that are insightful, they're reflective, they look at ways they can grow, they look to improve. Those are the type of people that you want to keep on your team, as opposed to folks who get in their feelings or they don't want to do it, right? Because they feel like it's too much work. Like, you're just asking them to do the job that they signed up for. Insight number 4 is for you to structure and build for where you are going, not for where you currently are. I was working with one of my elite clients, one of my elite one-on-one clients yesterday. And during our virtual VIP day, one of the things that we did was that we planned out her entire year and we solidified her offers. And so one of the questions that I asked her was, how much do you want to work? And at first she couldn't see where I was going. But as I began to hear her offers, I began to hear how she had them structured. I said to her, I said, do you realize that you have this 6-week offer that you have designed to where you are showing up twice per week? I said, one of the things you've shared with me is that you are a busy executive. You've got this, you've got this. Do you really think that for 6 weeks, you can show up and give your best in full capacity, and you're showing up live twice a week, every 6 weeks? And now you're telling me that you only want 1 week off in between each cohort, meaning that before you start with a new group of clients, you only want to take 1 week off? And so she thought about it. She said, now that you say it that way, that does seem like a lot. I'm like, yes, because you're not only facilitating, you're planning, you're also preparing for your clients. And you're teaching live twice per week in the evenings. And then you only want 1 week off in between each cohort. You got to think about how you're going to be for the whole year. That's burnout. Like, let's put 2 weeks in between each cohort. Let's structure this to where you are live teaching once per week, and you host if you want to meet another day, then it's virtual co-working or some type of support that doesn't require you being on live teaching and facilitating information. And so when you are structuring your programs and you're building them, you want to build for where you are going, not where you are. If you don't want to be on the rat race, don't structure your programs, your offers and services in a way that's going to require you to be in the rat race. Think about how much you want to work. Think about the energy that you're going to have to put out. Think about the effort that you're going to have to give. I want you to think about these things. Because if you want to work twice per month, then that already tells you you're not going to be able to sell anything low ticket. You're going to have to sell something high ticket or ultra high ticket, and work with fewer people. And it's not just selling, but you're going to have to work with people that's already generating a certain level in business who can afford your offer and service if you only want to work a certain amount. You can't come sell a $25 membership and say with that $25 membership, you only want to work, twice per month. Unless, of course, you have a plan to scale that membership all the way up to where it's generating 5 or 6 figures per month. And then you hire others to facilitate some of the delivery and the client support. In that case, you can do that. But typically, it's going to take some time and strategy for you to get to that point. It doesn't have to take a long time. It's going to definitely take you some strategy to get to that point. You want to build a structure for where you are going, not where you are. Okay? So I hope that this was a little bit longer than I normally do, but I hope that this episode was helpful for you. I definitely will end up doing some separate episodes on hiring and how I hire now, based, especially in comparison to how I hired in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, and some things to remember about hiring and training and building and growing your team. Okay. Definitely. Thank you so much for listening. If this has been useful to you, leave a comment, leave a review, like the podcast, subscribe, share this out to someone who needs this. And I will see you on the next episode. Peace, love, and impact until next time.